right. Welcome everyone to our Resource YYC podcast. Today we have Catherine Bell as our guest speaker. So she is our wonderful author. And of course, the person who will be speaking with her is our co-founder, Ron. All right, I will pass it over to you, Ron.
Thanks, Rosemary, and thanks everyone who's joining this podcast today. I am co-founder of Resource YYC, Ron Bettine, and the purpose of this series is really to help introduce our members and a lot of people viewing in on in this case, we want to introduce you some professional consultant and author in Calgary, and we really like to build community as well. There's a lot of great people and resources in Calgary that a lot of people don't know about. So thanks for joining today. We're going to do the podcast first, and if anybody joining us live, we'll do some Q&A after as well. So before we start, a bit about Catherine. She's a successful serial entrepreneur, business leader, and best-selling business author. She's focused on awakening the fire as a founder of the Awaken company. Catherine founded BluEra, a Profit 500 executive search firm, which was a shining example of an Awaken company in action before it was successfully sold. So some real practical experience that backs up her new consulting company as well. And as the author of the Awaken company, she wrote a revolutionary business book, and it was recognized as one of the top books combining business and mindfulness, and was awarded the Nautilus Book Awards in Business and Leadership. It was a bestseller 1 week after it was released on Amazon, and chosen as one of 8 of the best leadership books of 2015. She now helps organizations develop cultural strategies. This includes consultants from all over the world, and teaches at Queen's in the Masters of Entrepreneurship and Innovation. And she's actually qualified to do Enneagram personality profiling. Creates a roadmap to presence. So well qualified, and on top of that, Catherine's quite involved in the community. She's an advisor on TelSpark Center. She's involved in the Impact Society for Young, which is a society for young kids, and is been involved in the Haskayne School of Business. They have a Shark Tank there, so that'll be interesting as well. And been on the expert panel, the Canadian Center of Purpose of the corporation. So wow, a lot of stuff. And on top of that, you have your MBA from Smith School of Business at Queen's University and a sociology degree from Western University. So welcome to the podcast, Catherine. Have we run out of time talking about all the stuff you've done already?
Thank you so much for welcoming me, Ron. It's great to be with you again.
Yeah, it's great. And we have a few common connections, and one is actually through Queen's School of Business. I'm a graduate of Queen's, so nice to chat with an alumni. And then, of course, in Calgary, it's a small world. There are always 1 or 2 degrees of separation in the Calgary business world. So, yeah. So why don't we talk? First of all, your book. It was written in 2015, but it's just almost as relevant or more relevant as ever. I mean, man, that was so long ago, 2015. But with COVID and everything else, tell us a bit about your book and why it's, if you don't mind, just a quick overview and why it's still relevant in 2022.
Well, great question, because most business books only survive 6 months. That's kind of the average duration. And really what the Awaken Company book stands for is how to bring humanity back in our organizations, and how to also bring that regeneration in terms of how do we think about our planet, how we treat our people, and the implications thereof. So it really takes a stand for businesses are here to create solutions to problems that don't cause harm to either the environment or humanity. So that's what it takes a stand for. And now it seems to be ever more, there's more awareness around this than there was in 2015 when when I wrote it, but many people still got it in 2015. But now I feel like it's really coming to season, like a piece of fruit that's just that's ripe, ready to be eaten. That's the way the Awaken company is.
So it was on the leading edge in 2015. It's on the needing edge in 2022.
That's a brilliant way to put it, Ron.
So, well, and you're totally right, because some books, they're a bit of a flash in the pan, right? They get written and they never hear about them again. But it's nice to see, well, what was your crystal ball like in 2015? So obviously you saw some needs for this, but are companies at all what you expected 7 years ago? Like what has been the evolution of companies in the last 7 years that makes this so much more needed?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. Well, the pandemic, I think, brought everything to bear, and just the situation in terms of our planet and how interconnected we are and how everything we do affects each other. And that really that is what the Awaken company is all about, is this sense of interdependency. And the model of the Awaken company is based on wisdom traditions, practical know-how, and business research. So it has stood the test of time as a result, just recognizing our interdependency and how everything somebody does affects another person. And people can't often believe that this was written in Alberta by an Alberta writer. And I just would like to invite everybody into a different way of thinking, that we all can be entrepreneurs, and it's really organizations that are going to solve the world's greatest challenges. And by organizing differently, as the Awaken company suggests. So it's really like, okay, we need to do this now. And our environment and some of our humanities issues are telling us now is the time. And really, it's always been the time, though. We always have wanted to have our humanity back into our workplace, not dissociated from the work that we do.
So what would be some key elements of bringing that humanity back into the workplace? What's some of the key ideas that come out of your book?
So a great framework for entrepreneurs listening to this and business leaders listening to this is, we're like a drop in the ocean. So we're the drop, and the drop is one single element of an Awaken company, and that is awakening ourselves. The next element is to awaken our relationship and our relatedness. That is how we work together and forming real connections in our organization. Then the next one is our teams, awakening our teams, our organizations, and our world. And there's ripples with every single little thing that we do. For example, most business leaders don't know 2/3 emphasis should be put on corporate culture, 1/3 on financial results. When often when we're meeting with CEOs, the focus is financial. When no, what we need is, okay, what problem are we solving? Who are we solving it for? Why are we doing this? And to put metrics in place to measure our corporate cultures. And there's various kind of various hows of how we do each one of those ripples in the ocean.
So very much like Simon Sinek, the why, right? Understanding the why.
Yes.
The why, and a lot of that is a why for the customer, but you really turn that a little more inward into why for the companies and the people there. Is that?
Okay, so we both know marketing. So
Yeah.
Let's talk the 4 P's from our MBA:
Yeah.
product, price, promotion, placement, and building a relationship with our customer. How are we building a relationship with ourselves? And how are we building a relationship with our teams? That's what the Awaken company takes a stand for. It's the who. Who are we? And are we acting in integrity with our inner selves to help set a ripple upon the outer world?
So I'm curious, a lot of this came out of your experience with your company, BluEra.
Yes.
So at that point, you hadn't wrote the book for yourself yet. So did you, going into that company, did you visualize how you wanted the company to be, or is this book more a reflection of how you learned how to manage that company?
Great question. the book was very much iterative, which I believe every
Yeah.
corporation should be. It's like more like an organism. It
Mhm.
took over 7 years to write The Awaken Company. And it began in a dimly lit cafe in New York City. And
Oh my goodness, this is like out of a movie or something.
picture,
Does it have mood music and everything, or?
So Ron, you and I, let's just pretend this, but we're going to relive this moment. You're going to be Carolyn and I'm going to be me. So we're sitting in this dimly lit cafe in New York City, and the words, The Awakened Company, just dropped into my being. And I'm like, Carolyn, but I'm going to say, Ron, I have to write this book, The Awakened Company.
And this was back while you still had BluEra, or is this after?
Yeah, this was at the very start of BluEra.
Oh, okay. So it was iterative to you, basically, were at the same time you're forming the company, building the company.
Totally.
Thinking the book anyways. Yeah.
Well, and then the book thought me.
Yeah.
Like, because everything we were doing then is, well, and Carolyn, just to conclude our little intimate moment in the cafe, in the New York cafe, and she's like, yes, you got to do it. And I wrote a first draft of the book, and it was all about recruiting. And my partners were like, this is terrible.
That was your company, right?
Yeah, exactly. This is terrible. They're like, Kath, you're not taking a stand for what we believe in, what you believe in. Because really, BluEra was like a petri dish for me. Mm-hmm. An experiment of applying all the wisdom, because Shahana also, who founded the business with me, she was an MBA as well.
Yeah.
So we were both applying kind of our MBA wisdom, and then we were doing things like, this is over a decade ago, on mindfulness. Mm-hmm. So we'd have breaks and stillness breaks in the boardroom. Anyone could call them at any time. We did yoga together. Everything we were doing was kind of cutting edge. So I was weaving that into the book as we were going. And at the same time, I got in touch with a publisher. I don't know if you've heard of Eckhart Tolle, Ron, or not, but Eckhart Tolle wrote The Power of Now. And I just thought it represented the level of consciousness of the book, which was different than most business books, because it was, we wove in all of these different aspects. And I had 2 collaborators, Russ Hudson and Christopher Papadopoulos. And so I brought, anyway, back to the publisher. I brought it to the publisher, Ron, and she's like, no way am I going to publish this. And, you know, I have that kind of grit. When somebody says no, and I think it should be a yes, I am unrelenting. And I think that's something that I would say most entrepreneurs have that thread within them, that if they truly believe in something, where there's a will, there's a way, and then something else takes over. Anyway, I convinced her to publish the book. So the book, and then I was weaving thought leaders in, like Otto Scharmer from MIT, Rosemary Cario, CEO of Patagonia at the time, Mac Van Willigan from ARC, like weaving in all of these people to say, okay, how do we build better cultures for and better places for people to be at?
So just from a timeline, so 2015, BluEra, you had already sold BluEra, or?
No. So
okay,
BluEra
so this is happening. This is parallel.
Yeah. BluEra started in 2008, possibly the worst time to start an executive search firm. And we learned all the way through it. And then what's interesting is this book was like a seed, right? Like it's like a baby, or not the book, the company was like a baby, and now it's growing up to fruition. And I'm like a grandma now. You know, it continues to thrive, successfully transitioned partnership. And even that takes a lot of compassion, a lot of love, and a lot of wisdom to do that, because there can be a lot going on as a founder. So now actually some of the companies that I consult to is founders who are looking to transition, so I can help them kind of see the things that I missed, and also do some of the things that work for me, so that it will work for them as well.
So there's so much of this book is a story, because I'm curious. So how big was BluEra at the time when you're writing this book?
It was quite large for an executive search firm. I don't remember the exact number of our team, but we were profit 20 in Alberta, profit 200 in Canada. We were recognized as an Alberta top workplace. So everything we're doing, and we had unlimited vacation. So everything we were doing was working to build kind of this There was this momentum.
Yeah, so this is a huge petri dish that you're experimenting with while you're writing your book. So what was some of the employee engagement like during this period? So first of all, was everything exactly how you wanted, or did you have to, were some things bust as you in that petri dish?
Oh, that's a really great question. Of course, there's some things bust.
Yeah.
If you're not pushing hard enough, there won't be any busts. What would I say was a big bust? Oh, here's a personal big bust, like major bust. Don't let anyone do this. Don't do this at home, people. So what I did is I brought the group together. I'm like, this is our vision, like arrogant CEO,
Okay.
MBA speak. Yeah. And I just said, this is our vision team. And okay, you got it now. And then we brought a consultant in from Denmark because we're doing things that nobody in Canada was doing. And the first question he asked the team was, what's your vision? And nobody raised their hands, Ron. I cried myself.
Because they're scared to say it, or because they actually didn't own it?
Because I jammed it down their throats. I didn't get them involved in the process. Like, it was an epic leadership failure. And so what did we do? We built the vision with him. And then it made me realize Margaret Wheatley's principle, people support what they create. So the more we can engage our teams in them, the better. But that was an epic leadership fail.
So that's what I was going to ask you. So what would an Awaken company do in that situation?
So we actually work with a lot of organizations on how to create vision and get buy-in from everybody in your organization to help create that vision. So a process that people can use as you're building out your company is to, first of all, have a conversation in terms of Simon Sinek's video is a great one to look at.
Yeah.
The process is to start creating story around why you exist, kind of your inspirational thoughts for 5 years from now. What do you want to be? Do breakouts around creating some sentences, and then keep on narrowing until you feel like you've got it. And then it needs to be socialized. And that's a part people often forget. And what do I mean by socialize? It needs to be repeated time and time again. So for example, at the Awaken company, I feel very confident everyone would know what our vision is to ignite and sustain the fire within, our values, which are passion, purposefulness, and playfulness. So, but that's socialized. We talk about it. It's like, how are we living this? Whereas what I did initially was that leadership kind of, it was awful. Don't do it. Any business leaders, don't do it.
It was a classic way to do it.
It was a typical command and control way to do it. And that's not what is in the best interest of everybody in our organization.
So how, so every company you go into would have a different cultures, and some would be all engineers, some might be all creative, or all sales and marketing, because each company is different, right? So how do you find adaptability to an Awaken company to different companies? Is it because ultimately I suspect you want the same philosophies, but is the approach change with different companies and their cultures?
Well, I don't even think we want the same philosophies. I think the culture needs to dictate itself and not be aspirational, but lived. And I'm not big into cookie cutter culture, or else why would we want all the same, right? Like that kind of takes the joy and fun and diversity and inclusivity out of it. Yeah. So it's really getting organizations to define for themselves what those cultural metrics are. And then look at how the 3 pillars of the organizational aspect of an Awaken company are energize, sustain, and regenerate. And how are they doing that across those 3 pillars? But it's all customized to what it is that the culture's asking to be created for.
Oh, so you really do. Because that's, for me, and I totally agree, there's not a cookie cutter. In fact, some of the busts I've seen where someone had a great idea that works somewhere else and just assumes it's going to work exactly the same. Some of the principles and ideas are good, but understanding the culture is huge, right? And I think actually back to your story about top down, no matter what the company, the more people are engaged, the more they own it, the more they'll live it, right? So, yeah.
And when we get people's discretionary energy, and not only that, it's a lot more fun and joyous.
So,
Like life's too short.
yeah, and isn't that's your last like part of that is how to how to have fun at work, right? And how to enjoy what did you just say there? The 3 pillars or the
Energize, sustain, and regenerate.
and regenerate, yeah. And then it's really enjoying your workplace as well, right? So what kind of things do you encourage companies do to actually live those 3 things?
So first of all, I would suggest that we begin with that first pillar around awakening ourselves. So, and what the research shows is the more self-aware we are as leaders, the higher performing we are. So I think every leader and every leadership team, and I believe everybody to be a leader. Did you know if we call anyone a follower, their performance actually decreases? So we all should be eliminating the term follower in any way or anything that kind of diminishes anyone else's humanity. So first of all, is self-awareness. And for that, I would suggest using the Enneagram. It's really as a roadmap to presence. I would also suggest that people have stillness breaks. And here's something simple we can all do, which is, are we coming from more our awake place or more of our asleep place? Are we feeling like life is for me, or are we feeling like life is against me in some way? So I think just using that, like, for example, and making deliberate choices around that. And I'm going to use, let's think of something that would be asleep. Something that I've dealt with recently is, somebody wasn't a fit for a role that they were in. Mm-hmm. The asleep place would have kept them in that role and just had everybody suffer. The awake place was to make the hard decision to say, oh, I think you may be a better fit here, doing this type of work. And it was an extremely tough conversation for me. And the results thus far have been outstanding. There's a lot more harmony, putting somebody where their strengths are. So it's like, how are we making those fiercely compassionate decisions? And they're not always easy, Ron. They're not always easy.
I'm curious on that point, because as a recruiter, you'd actually methodically spend a lot of time matching people, right?
Oh my goodness. I had a 90% stick rate. And it's because I was so fastidious with the empiricism of the process.
So, I mean, that would have been something you brought into that discussion, where your entire company was built around matching people to the right job and probably telling people they're not suitable for certain jobs either, against their probably aspirations, right?
Very much so, very much so. And however, they could always be a candidate and a successful candidate for the next search.
Yeah.
So I think we also have to pay attention to what is emerging through life itself. And to keep those relationships. If we damage those relationships, that's one thing that in the Awaken company, when we talk about awakening relationships, is to keep that distinction between what's our role and what's our relatedness. And to always remember our connection to the other person is our relatedness. The role can change.
Yeah, no, that totally. Well, and that's kind of a life thing too, right? Because if you always treat people the same roles, parent, child, or whatever, then you never bust out of that in your whole life, right? So cool. No, that's all. Hey, can I just want to go back and ask you about Enneagram a bit, because you mentioned it. You said that would be a great, that's an application for Enneagram. So tell us a bit about that.
So the Enneagram is an ancient personality map for how do we be more present in our lives. It dates back to over 2500 BC. I recently went to Egypt in February to check out where the birthplace was. It was pretty amazing. However, what it does for us is it shows us what our gifts are, what our work-ons are, and also what we can become. Because we're not our Enneagram type per se, where we have a dominant Enneagram type. However, we have there's 9 different types. So Enneagram, so 9, and gram is map. So it's a map of 9. We all have all 9 types within us. So it's like, how are we dancing with all the different aspects of ourselves? And where do we need to grow and where do we need to learn? And also what gifts can we bring the world?
So that complements like a Myers-Briggs and all that, or would it replace those other type of personality?
We have clients who use Myers-Briggs DISC, etc., and the Enneagram. So it's very much depends on what the client needs. I have found for me the Enneagram to be much deeper, and because of its ancient roots. Now, the downside of that, Ron, is it's more complicated.
Oh,
It's not like I'm a simple box. It's like, oh, I'm all of this. Wow. And I have a dominant type, and then I have my instincts. And yeah, so it's more complicated. However, I have found it, and we have found it very, very helpful to work with teams. So for example, Bliss and I, one of my colleagues, we go through and we map teams in terms of what are the dominant types, what are the types on the team, what's missing, and then how do they all work together? And then they weave it into their personal development plans as well. So everything's kind of interconnected.
and you wrote the book before this, and you started the company. So how did, and for you, clearly, I guess, Roadmap to Presence clearly complements the book. How did you stumble into the Enneagram, or did you deliberately go find something that aligned with the Awaken company?
My mother and my aunt introduced the Enneagram to me, and my aunt was working at Corn Ferry in the UK. And so Corn Ferry in the UK was using it, and that's how I got introduced to it. At first I was like, no way, you can't put me in a box. No way. I've got way too much energy for all of you to put me in a box. And so I've grown up with it.
Wow. Okay. So it sounds like you've lived and breathed your entire life in Awaken company, at least your career. And now you've integrated this in. That's interesting. So tell me I know nobody ever necessarily gives you candid feedback, but people who've worked in your company or been through this program, what kind of, to get candid feedback or any really positive feedback on how it's affected them in the workplace or their companies?
Well, one organization, let's talk about our team. So our team, I've had feedback from our team that it's changed some people's lives in our team. And that means the absolute world to me.
Cool.
And we've also worked with organizations, and they've gone from 0 to 5 billion in less than 5 years. So there's some financial results. And then also helping CEOs transition their organizations through to new ownership. And just the implications of that for them personally is just hugely, hugely rewarding. And now doing all of these webinars internationally on the Enneagram, and also teaching at Queen's. I mean, I'm working with kids, with students, they're not kids, students in 23 different countries.
Wow. So
to every entrepreneur, like just anything little you can do, you'd be surprising the ripple it can have. That's for everybody.
So back to your stone in a pool, right? The ripple goes big. So
it's so
hey,
good.
we've almost already gone over half an hour. We're at the half an hour mark already. So there's a few other questions I want to just kind of. So we have a lot of people watch. They want to listen to authors who've done business books and that, and actually find a bit about the whole process of writing a book. So you said you started in a restaurant under dimly lit. So is that your advice to everybody? If you want to write a book, start in a dimly lit restaurant in New York. Is that the secret to success? And then what is the huge gap in writing a book between that and actually publishing a book?
Always go to New York and always sit in a dimly lit cafe. I would say let the book seek you.
Yeah.
So number one is let the book seek you. Yeah. And I'm in the process now of writing 3 additional books. So in terms of process, so let me get granular so that people can walk away with, here's what to do, is begin. Number one is begin. Put pen to paper. Just begin. And for some people like me, I have a dedicated writing practice where I literally have booked off of my time. I have it on my notepad here. This is what I'm going to write about today. And just begin. And then as you begin, iterate and be open to learning what the book has to teach you.
Mhm.
I would also suggest that you have a really strong foundation in what you're writing about. Like the Awaken Company is a lived experience,
Yeah.
and people aren't interested unless you've lived the experience. So really get the experience and then find a publisher you want to work with. Go after them, talk to them, iterate, grow, learn. And then in terms of getting the book out into the world, there's so many things I would have done differently.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I didn't realize how much work it was going to be.
Oh, to write the book or to market the book?
All of it.
Yeah, wow.
Like 7 years to write it, 7 years to write it, and then to get it out. You know, it was a bestseller, and but man, did I have to hustle.
Mhm.
And I think that hustle is even more now.
So you were an entrepreneur. So it sounds like having a bit of an entrepreneurial background to writing and marketing a book is helpful then.
Yes, I would define myself as a serial entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Like I can't help but to create. Like it's just simply
Yeah.
in my DNA to create. And so having that entrepreneurial mindset and also being willing to experiment with, I'm going to do this, I'm going to try that, I'm going to reach out to Rose Marquer, the CEO of Patagonia. She did not know me at all. And she said, yes, I'll help you with your book. So yes, that entrepreneurial mindset, that energy, that potential. And now, for example, like speaking of books being sought or seeking you, you know, over the last few years, I've been writing poetry. So now I have over hundreds of pages of poetry that's now with a professor of poetry, and she's dissecting it and working on a playbook for the Awaken Company, which is the how. And oh, Ron, that's been a lesson too.
Yeah. Why is that?
Oh, well, because I thought I wrote it. I'm like, oh, this is good. And then my colleague Russ, who's working with me on it, was like, no, this is terrible. And then I'm like, I need to completely, and then I'm completely rejigging it, completely redoing it. And I'm literally in my book, the playbook is going, what I hope it to be is to be a real gift to entrepreneurs, taking everything I've learned in small, medium-sized businesses, everything I've learned and saying, apply it, like giving all the framework. So now even the implicit things that I do, really working on writing those down so that in the playbook it's there, because anyone can create a business.
So it would really, I mean, once you're done, so get that thing done and get it out. It would be it would totally complement you. You would get both books in. One,
Right.
you'd read the Awakening Company and then have the playbook to execute it. So yeah, so don't waste any time on that. Get that out. It's clearly a missing piece of that book puzzle, except then you should also be reading poetry at the same time. So can you share a poem with us?
Well, okay, so
this will literally be the first time, perhaps the last time I've asked any of our business writers to share a poem, because I'm scared what some of them might have. But I actually think this could be interesting. So yeah, if you have a poem there, share away.
I do. So this is at the front of the playbook.
Yeah.
We must not declare it an era of why. It is an era of who. Who do we have to be to solve the great mysteries? And in the who, we will unlock all of the world's greatest unknowns. These will help us solve the riddles of our time. The world is burning. We haven't a moment to lose.
Wow, very nice. I'm actually taking me back to ancient Egypt in that whole thing there.
Are you? Do you feel it? How did
the riddles of our time go back thousands of years, right? So no, that's very nice. So that's the front of your playbook.
That's the front of the playbook. And in a way, I think, Ron, it kind of invites in that we've got to do things differently.
Yeah.
And operate from this alignment of our inner selves.
Well, this has been a very quick and fun conversation. Any final, so if anybody's listening to this, do you have any final kind of words of advice or anything for people that, and probably more for the individuals, either a manager or an employee at a company, any takeaways that we haven't talked about or that you'd like to leave the conversation with?
When we think about energize, sustain, and regenerate, I use the word think about. So often we're either driving our boats forwards or sideways or backwards. I'd invite every leader to kind of go into neutral and to really think about what it is that we're creating together. So to take a pause, take a deep breath, center, so that our actions, our words are more in alignment with what it is the world truly needs at this time.
Very thoughtful, goes well with the poem. So thank you very much. Oh, I suppose we should get quite practical now. If someone wants to buy your book or contact you, what's the best way to contact you or get your book?
So you can find the book on Amazon. You can go to awakencompany.com and you can find out where else it's being sold. And awakencompany.com, contact us, join our newsletter. We're continually offering practical hints. So this month's newsletter, we're on accountability.
Oh,
So that's a big topic for leaders, for CEOs. So offering very practical hints about how do we help weave in accountability into our organizations. We're also on LinkedIn. So link me in, link our groups in, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We also have a huge video on demand library that you can find as well.
excellent. And Rosemary, I think we're going to put the links, at least the key links on attached to this podcast when we post it. So, and it'll be available. And if they want to see you live in person, they have to take the Queen's MBA program. Is that what I heard?
You love
Okay. So that's an expensive way to see us spoke, but if you're speaking anywhere in town or involved, it'll be posted on your website as well, right?
It will be. Thank you very much for noticing that. Yes. And you can go to Catherine R. Bell too. That's another one of our newer websites.
Cool. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. I look forward to catch up in person sometime. Maybe over a glass of wine in a restaurant. Sounds like the best place to have a good conversation. So.
Ron, glass of wine in a restaurant, not beer, no beer, glass of wine.
So thanks again, Rosemary. I'll let you close it off. Thanks.
All right. Thank you both for such a great conversation. I hope everyone managed to get some good ideas, not just to start a business in a small restaurant. But yeah, so Catherine, you had some great insights for everyone to take out from. So thank you very much. And if anybody needs a place to work on some ideas, come down to Resource YYC. We have lots of options for you, dedicated desks, office spaces, even meeting rooms if you want to pick someone's brain. So come check us out if you need to. All right, and thank you very much for joining us today. Hope you have a great rest of your day.